Hello everyone, welcome back to Flying Solo with Kat, and today I am super excited to talk about Thrawn 2017. Now, if you don't know anything about Timothy Zahn or the Thrawn books, basically he created whole bunch of books in 1990 that were all legends and went into the Chiss ascendancy and developed on this character we now know as Thrawn. And of course, he was made canon in 2016 when Star Wars Rebels introduced him, which I think is great, and I love him in the animation medium. So it was really cool to see him. So then Timothy Zahn got asked to write an actual canon book about Thrawn and how he rose to power in the Empire, which brings us to the book we are talking about today. If you have not read the book, I would highly recommend it if you are a Star Wars fan and you love the Empire. For me, I've always been interested in the Empire, especially in the First Order. Y'all know this. So it was really cool to see the material, the militaristic hierarchy that there is. We get some big names dropped as Tarkin, Palpatine, Vader, and it doesn't feel like they're shoehorned in. It feels like a very rounded world that we are focusing on Thrawn and Elivanto. Right after I finished the book, I quickly took out a notepad and just basically wrote an entire quote unquote essay per se about the book and my initial thoughts. And now it has been 2 months since I finished the book, and then I'll go in and talk about my thoughts now thinking about it, especially after I've seen Ahsoka. So first I'm gonna just read off my word for word essay, and then I will talk about it fully. So anyway, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy. Thrawn by Timothy Zahn could be said to hold no value to the constant stories of Star Wars. With the ample comics, Legends books, and the Ascendancy trilogy, it could be argued that Thrawn is not worth the read. That was my opinion before I opened the book, and was delightfully surprised at the real level of military and political story on how good people can do bad things for the right reasons. How many could argue that the main character of the Star Wars franchise exhibit those traits. Good versus evil, and get with Thrawn, and the way Zahn takes his character and molds him into the more further portrays of the theme that is good versus evil is not always black and white. A constant motif throughout the book is that the beginning of each chapter, Zahn writes a short excerpt from Thrawn's thoughts on the militaristic ideas and goals, how he sees himself in as a predator in the sea of prey, not overconfident but sure of his abilities to gain insight on the Empire. We meet Ensign Elivanto first, who is your classic young man looking to serve his government. He finds pride in offering himself to the Empire and is the basis of every other young man or woman wanting to join the Empire. He thinks highly of his military, almost to serve as Thrawn. But when the two meet, they are similar. But as Zahn likes to always bring up, Thrawn is an alien, trash to many of the people in the Empire. The big difference is that Thrawn moves on, not caring much about what he is compared to, who he is, while Ellie, who is from the Outer Rim, which could also be considered trash or lesser, Ellie lets it define him, knowing his place. Thrawn's hope in the Empire is to make his place known, protecting his home through the means of working with the Empire. Arena Price is almost the same as Ellie, in which she is stuck in trying to claw her way to the top. At first, though, innocent gestures, but after she is framed, then becomes bloodthirsty to the predator and not the prey. A sweet, naive bystander like Ellie, turning into a man like Thrawn over the course of the book. At first, her story seems irrelevant with Thrawn's and the Empire, but as she climbs to the political ladder, just as Thrawn does in the military, we start to see the similarities. Zahn shows us, with each passing chapter, passing battle, what Thrawn's real intentions are. What's fun about reading how Zahn characterizes Thrawn is that he never makes Thrawn lie. His motivations are laid out bare for the reader and himself, and yet when he is talking to Night Swan, the book's main antagonist who keeps stealing from the Empire, you get a sense of purpose when Thrawn says, "There are evil things in this galaxy, Night Swan, far more evil than our empire and far more dangerous to all living beings." Thrawn is telling the audience, telling Night Swan, who he had been chasing for years, that his actions in his mind are justified and that for the sake of his people is really special and something that we don't get to see in many villains. Their ability to know what they want, but their acting upon it by any means necessary. These themes and stories sound basic, but it's either Timothy Zahn's writing or Thrawn's character that makes you want to know more about him, Ellie, Night Swan, Arena, and the Chiss Ascendancy, and the world of Star Wars. I've watched Star Wars Rebels and the recent Ahsoka, who featured Thrawn. I had never truly connected with him, as the show was, of course, on the side of the good guys. With this story, though, we get to see the same Thrawn, but through the lenses of his comrades and not the enemy. Not adding layers upon layers of tragic backstory or pity, but a different angle of evil. One of my favorite things Zahn does is when Thrawn is in the third person limited. Thrawn adds italics of description on how the characters who are interacting with Thrawn feel, almost as if we are inside his brain. Something that he uses to gain wins throughout the course of the story. But he is not your typical Vader or Tarkin. He was something more, a tactical genius who just happens to be an alien. If you're someone who likes politics, military, of course, Star Wars, I would definitely give it a read. As for the character of Thrawn, this is one of his best adaptations from the comics in recent history. Timothy Zahn's writing style is amazing and does a great job at keeping you interested. Compared to the other Star Wars books I have read, such as Phasma, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, this is definitely up there as one of the best pieces of Star Wars media that has been produced in recent date. If you're worried about not knowing the pre-existing characters, Zahn makes sure not to gloss over any characters, more often than not having very minor characters play major roles as the story progresses. I would give it 5 porgs out of 5 porgs. I would recommend it for non-Star Wars fans, and I just want to give my thanks to Timothy Zahn for writing an amazing book and an even more interesting character. So those were my thoughts on Thrawn initially, and quite honestly, me kind of thinking about it, there isn't much I would change about those statements. Thrawn, you get to see so much of his character, and at first I wasn't a huge fan of Ellie Vanto, which is shocking, and a lot of people are like, oh my god, how can you not like him? What? Ellie Vanto is a very interesting character. He exhibits so much of Thrawn's traits, but he's very much just kind of a little baby in the grand scheme of things of the Empire. And of course, he's rightfully mad at Thrawn because Thrawn keeps climbing the military ladder while Ellie had all these years of training and, all of that. So it is a bit odd. But what's funny and what I really like about this book and actually kind of kept me interested is that Thrawn just kept climbing the militaristic, ladder. Half because Palpatine was just like, yeah, dude, I'll give you whatever. But the other half of just he kept winning. And even when obstacles were trying to be put in his way, they failed, did not succeed. So to see that through Ellie's eyes, especially as someone, he was very jealous. But at the end of the book, he understands more of Thrawn, and he understands himself more. He's more confident. As I said, Thrawn, the racism in this book is very prevalent, and I like that Timothy didn't kind of go away from that and just be like, oh no, like they're the Empire, they're just super weird. Like, he went into the logistics of it, and I loved how he brought up with Ellie being from the Outer Rim, and people thought the same of him. It was easy to relate to, because just because you don't look visually like you're from a certain place, you still could be from there, and you will carry that with you no matter what. One of the main things as humans that we connect ourselves with is, where are you from? Who are your people? Where do you reside in? And for Zahn to show that in a way of both Thrawn being an alien and Ellie being from an Outer Rim planet was really, really great. And I loved that they just went all for it. And it wasn't even subtle racism where it was like alien trash or, Outer Rim people are stupid. It was subtle hints as bigger, Imperials not really knowing about the Outer Rim, thinking it lesser because they were all from the core worlds at the start. And that's also why I think the First Order is really interesting, because you have a lot of those communities that fled to the Outer Rim and realized, oh, these communities aren't necessarily what we thought, but we could still take advantage of them. And that is how they gained power, because they got all the Outer Rim territories, to where the older Imperials, they didn't care about the Outer Rim, which is what kind of almost, screwed them up, because many rebel, places were in the Outer Rim. So that was amazing to see. Miss Price, I liked her in Star Wars Rebels. I liked Callus more, to be honest. I was kind of hoping that I would get to see Callus in this book, but he was not there, so I was a little bummed. But I love her, because she is, at the start of the book, she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. She was kind of just plopped into a position, and then everything turns on its head and she starts down at the bottom. But she claws her way back to the top by basically any means necessary, and knowing people and knowing connections. So that was good to see too, because especially with Andor, I'm going to lead this into so many different Star Wars shows. With Andor, you see Mon Mothma, you see the Lutheran, you get to see how politics are changing with the Empire in power, and how the ISB has more influence, and everyone's being watched. So seeing her go from this political figure, helping a very high political figure, and then just getting basically framed and down to the bottom, it's very realistic. And I think we're gonna see some of this in Andor. We already kind of did, with how Mon Mothma was saying that all her guards have been changed out overnight, that anywhere she goes, she's being watched by the Empire. And I find that really interesting, and it was kind of delved into in Thrawn. And that's also another thing too. It's amazing how shout out to Tony Gilroy for not liking Star Wars and making probably one of the best Star Wars products ever. But he took pre-existing themes that were from books, that were from, old TV shows, especially the movies, and implemented it into Andor. And I love reading Thrawn 2017 and then seeing things that connect with Andor 2022. So it's great. And I love it. And I really, really enjoyed Thrawn, mainly for that reason. It felt like it was not continuing. It was going back and kind of retelling the story that it needed to tell. And as for Thrawn, I mean, let's talk about Thrawn now, because he's supposed to be the main character of the book, and he is. I would argue that him and Ellie kind of share the spotlight. Um, but as for Thrawn, this is probably the main thing that I really like him in. It's a hot take because I don't know if I liked him in Rebels or not. I think I need to go back and actually watch it after reading this book and see, okay. I think Thrawn in Rebels, though, is better than Thrawn in Ahsoka. And I think a lot of people collectively agree upon that. And I think Thrawn in Ahsoka is the weakest because we don't see him do much. In Rebels, we see him do a lot through his dialogue, through his gestures, through literally battles. We get to see that. We did not see it in Ahsoka. And of course, we might see it in season 2 because that got announced. Yay, little clap. But in this book, you got to it was like you're in the battle with him. There were like 5 or 6 battles that over the course of the book that you read about. And through Thrawn's actions, you saw, okay, he's competent. Okay, he knows what he's doing. Yes, some of it's luck. Half of it's probably luck. But we get to see him act. And I think that's the main point of Thrawn and Thrawn as a character. You have to see him in his actions. Him speaking, great as it is sometimes not enough. And sometimes you need to show rather than tell. And with Thrawn, I think that's even more prevalent, to be honest. So, other than that, Thrawn was good. It was a really good book. I'll compare it to, I haven't talked about the other 3 that I've read of Star Wars. This is my 4th Star Wars book that I have read all the way through. I started New Dawn, which is about Kanan and Hera meeting. I did not get through that. And then I also started Princess and the Scoundrel because I was really excited about that book. And I made it to their wedding scene, and then I don't even know what happened to that book. I just stopped reading it for some reason. Oh, I have the book. I'm literally looking at it right now, but it doesn't have the cover on it. So that's why I keep forgetting it's there. So I do need to read that because I love some Leia and Han antics. I love them and I miss them. So those 2 I'm still working on, but I have read Obi-Wan Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. Amazing writer. I love him. It was just his birthday, I think, yesterday or a couple days ago. So happy birthday to him. Phasma by Dahlia S. Dawson. Y'all already know that's my favorite book. That's actually kind of what got me into reading Star Wars and what pushed me to even become fully fledged in the fandom. So I don't know. I think that book honestly needs its own video because there's so much to talk about. Let me know if you guys are interested in book reviews because I've never done something like this before. So let me know if you're interested or not. And then I read Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which was an interesting book. I was gonna drop it like through half of it because the story wasn't bad, but I feel like I wasn't getting much. But then after that half, it really pulled together and was actually really good. And I loved the politics of it and kind of teen Leia going out and helping people. Also, we got to see Holdo, or at least I think it's the first time in books that we get to see Holdo. I love her so much. Holdo is like literally me. As a friend, I'm kind of like a golden retriever. As a friend, and I feel like I'm Holdo, and then my other friend would be Leia. So I wish I had the poise and the calmness of Leia, but I don't. I think I'm more of a Holdo. So it was great to see her in that book too. But out of all of those, I think I would do Phasma, Thrawn, Obi-Wan, and then Leia. Not that Leia's bad or Obi-Wan's bad or whatever. Just that I think on enjoyment level, on writing, on story, I think that Phasma and Thrawn are probably the highest. And that's kind of the consensus for a lot of Star Wars fans that I've at least seen online. Phasma is regarded as like one of the best books of Star Wars ever. Yeah, I really should talk about that book. But Thrawn comes very, very close. Thrawn, I think if Thrawn was my favorite character, I think would actually go above Phasma. But Thrawn really takes the kind of honestly what we see in Phasma, like the militaristic power, the aggressiveness, the actual actions of fighting, and shapes it into a character that we want to follow. We don't root for. I don't root for Thrawn. I'm very much, I don't root for any villain character like, oh, I hope they kill this person, unless they're stupid. But as reading them and seeing their actions, it's kind of a morbidly interesting way of seeing how they attack, who they attack, their thought process. Thrawn very much reminds me of, other powers, and that they are only focused on winning and not who we damage in the fight. Who gets hurt while we're fighting. And when reading Thrawn, it had a lot of ties to some of the things that are going on in the world right now. And I don't know enough about it to talk about it on here, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But as I said in my last video, that is why Star Wars is so important, because we see what is going on in the real world being done by these terrible villains in Star Wars. And it makes you think, why in the real world are we siding with the villains? Why are we doing that? It doesn't necessarily make sense. So that is why Star Wars for me has always been important, but why books especially can tell such an impactful story that will change your mind on how you view some of, the world, basically. And, as for this book, not that it opened my eyes, of course, but it was more prevalent and more, okay, you're a villain. You're not a good person. Why is our world like this? Why is that world like this? Why is the Empire like that? So I found that really interesting on my read, and kind of it was a more subtle kind of way that Zahn wrote it, but it was prevalent and it was very important. But let me know if you guys read Thrawn. I've heard a couple people have read it. I've heard some people have still not. Totally recommend it if you love Thrawn, if you love the Empire. And it is some really, really good Star Wars. So, again, let me know if y'all read it. And I will see you guys in the next one.